Hello and welcome. This is Rugby Nation on Rugby.com.au. I'm Nick McArdle and Beth Newman is back for another week from Rugby.com.au. Beth, welcome to you. The biggest news of the last 24 hours or so, the appointment of Phil Kearns to head up the bid process for Australian rugby for the World Cup 2027.
Yeah, a very significant appointment. He's been appointed as the Executive Director of the World Cup Advisory Board, which I think we've spoken about before, includes some pretty big hitters in the business and in the rugby world. So, another high-profile appointment in that space and someone who's really going to be critical to whether or not Australia does win that 2027 World Cup bid. The process doesn't start till next year, but Australia is really getting ahead of the curve and putting themselves in the front there. And Kearnsy spoke today after being appointed and said that, he wants to be involved in Australian rugby. He has a lot of confidence in the direction that the game is going, and he seems really passionate about, helping steer this bid and hopefully to a successful outcome in a couple of years' time.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be open and honest and say that I'm an unabashed Phil Kearns fan after having worked with him for more than a decade, and I think everyone knows that Kearnsy has copped some criticism about his commentary, but what a lot of rugby fans don't understand is that he's spent many years now leading big business. He's well connected in the big end of town. He has a lot of respect in that community. He has a lot of respect in the rugby community, not only in Australia but throughout the world. And as I said, I'm biased, but to me it seems like a quite inspired appointment.
Yeah, as you say, he's probably someone who is a bit polarising with some rugby fans, partly because of his commentary and things like that. But, it is important to note, I think, as well, he has been someone who's agitated for a bit of change, along with a few other Wallabies captains this year. And I think it's important when those guys are calling for change that they then, can become involved in helping that change happen, because, he now is able to change the direction and kind of, put his money where his mouth is, I guess, and make the changes that he and so many others have advocated for. So it'll be really interesting to see the progress he makes there.
And as he said in today's media conference, he said, it's not as if Australian rugby is going to die if we don't get the World Cup, but gee, it'd be a hell of a bonus if we did. The income that it would generate, it would sustain the game, basically underwrite the game, I guess, in years to come. All right, so that's what's been happening off the field. Let's talk about some on-field action now. As we say, a very warm welcome from the Waratahs, Karmichael Hunt. Karmichael, welcome to you.
Cheers, Nick. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, how did you spend the bye week? Are you still ensconced down there in the Southern Highlands, just south of Sydney?
Yeah, correct. Still down in the Highlands, mate. Trying to keep warm. I think it's a top of 7 degrees today. Hasn't got any warm over the last week or so. So the fireplace has been cranking. Just been dropping the kids off to school. Just trying to enjoy some downtime.
And I guess it's a pretty good place to be, isn't it, right now, with what's going on out of the hustle and bustle of Australia's biggest city and in the quiet moments of the Southern Highlands?
Yeah, correct. We're kind of in our own bubble down here. We haven't had too many cases of COVID, I think. No community transition cases, which is my understanding. But very lucky to be, I guess, isolated in the Highlands, but still very much travel back and forth to Sydney when I need to.
How has it been for you as well, just this year, being able to probably spend more time with your family and your girls than as opposed to traveling the world every week?
Yeah, look, I guess that's one positive. I'll never say no to more family time. And especially with my kids being at the ages that they are at this point in time, it's quite a fun time. Very busy, mind you. At the end of the lockdown period, my wife and I, like probably many parents around Australia, are quite happy to send them on their way back to school. So, but no, yeah, I've enjoyed the time at home. But it's been good to be back in footy.
What have you been doing, obviously, apart from footy, Kay? But I did hear that you were studying psychology. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. So I've got, after this semester, 2 semesters left. So 4 subjects after this semester. So I'll finish my undergrad, Nick, with USQ, and then push on to do some my honours, and then obviously have to do a master's to practice as a psychologist. So that's kind of keeping me busy, along with obviously family duties and footy. Life's pretty good at the moment.
And is that what life holds for you? Like, is that your career post footy?
I would love to work in the industry. Yeah, no doubt. I think, for me, I sort of took this degree on about 5 or so years ago, and it was just trying to make sense of reality. It was quite murky for me back there. Obviously, I had some dramas, things going on, but as it's evolved and I guess the subjects have started to roll out, I've really taken a liking to obviously, the cognitive side of the theory. And I would like to match up, I guess, my playing experience over the last 17 years in the professional environment with a theoretical side of things. So I will probably head down the sports psych role in a couple of years. But yeah, I definitely, I think the performance psych side of things really tickles my fancy. I'd like to pair that with coaching after footy. So that's probably my two avenues at this point in time.
How important do you think that psychological side is to sport? I mean, as you say, you've been involved in professional sport for 17 years now. How much difference can the right mindset have?
Yeah, it can have a huge difference. I think you don't need to be a professional sports athlete to understand that. Look, a mindset can either stop you from reaching your goals or help you from reaching your goals. And I guess along the 17 years, I've had my ups and downs, from a playing perspective. And, a lot of the times it sort of comes back down to, preparation, trying to, I guess, keep my mind out of the picture, so to speak, and just allow my instincts to take over. And, as the years have gone by, I've slowly started to, discover things like mindfulness and, your breathing techniques and all these things that are sort of rooted in, your psychological degrees or your psychological industries. So, I think, more and more as I read, sports teams are hiring sports psychologists to be a part of their setup. Look, I had lucky enough, obviously coming into the Broncos at 17, I had Wayne as a coach, but also Phil Jauncey, who's a highly regarded sports psychologist as well, who was pretty much Wayne's right-hand man. He'd be in meetings, he'd be, giving us his thoughts on how to prepare mentally for games. So I was quite lucky to, I guess, have that set up around me coming through. And no doubt, look, you get plenty of pay from taking care of your mental side of things, when it comes to footy performance.
One of the things that sports psychs tend to rather spend a bit of time on is how to handle pressure. And we are going to talk a bit more about the Tahs-Reds clash a bit deeper later. But we're only halfway through the season, Karmichael, and things are starting to get a little bit desperate for the Tahs. 1 win from 4 games, sitting 4th out of 5 teams. Does it feel like that pressure is on right now?
I guess when the big picture in mind is, everyone wants to play finals football and we're no different. So, from that respect, being 1 and 4, yes, look, the pressure is on. We need to start getting results ASAP. And we're aware of that, but, the energy around the club is not one of panic. It's one of continuing to obviously get better each week. And, if we're being fair, look, we probably, we feel we should probably, at a minimum be 2 and 4. I think there's a Brumbies game there a few weeks back, which, the class side that they are just hung around, which they did on the weekend against the Reds as well, and got it at the death. So, we understand, we're not where we want to be, but we're definitely striving and we feel like we're moving in that right direction.
You guys have such a young squad. How have the guys handled that, particularly, you say, that Brumbies game where you were right in it and probably, should have won? How have they handled that kind of going out of that game and then, into the bye?
Yeah, look, definitely a pretty tough learning curve. I think, a lot of those young guys in that team, I think Hordo made his starting debut and had a cracker of a game and, probably was best on ground for us. But understanding, I think it was probably a good lesson for all those newcomers that, the game's not over until the final whistle goes. And when you come up against good teams like the Brumbies, you can't afford to let them back in. So, that's penalties, that's cheap turnover possessions because, they will make you pay. And, that's a lesson, which I think, if we look back pre-COVID as well, I think discipline, handling errors, probably, we're hurting ourselves more so than the opposition. But, it's something that, we need to look to improve this week. I know obviously coming up against the Reds, great set piece. Mind you, they're having some discipline issues of their own. So, maybe we're in the same boat when it comes to that, but we're looking for a better performance when it comes to penalties and turnovers.
The Tahs are a young side, and it's probably a really difficult season in which to to be a young side, short season, being played under different circumstances, the travel, different venues. So in a sense, should we not be surprised that maybe the Waratahs are struggling a little bit, or is it too easy to use that excuse?
Oh, yeah, I think, we are a young team. I don't think you can sort of, that's not an excuse, that's a reality. Things like travel, things like, the bubble situations, which, I think if anything, the Tars have probably got a little bit better than, say, your Melbourne Rebels. You're forcing that have been away from home for quite some time now. So, I guess, they are excuses which we aren't using, but, we are a young team. We know that. But in saying that, I think we've given ourselves, plenty of opportunities to win games, which we should have. It was probably, we didn't turn up against the Rebels and we hurt ourselves, with turning over the ball, especially in set piece. And, we rectified that and we understand that. So, look, maybe, some people will be sitting back at home saying, look, it is to be expected, but certainly within the club room, we're not happy. We feel like we should be getting more pay for our effort. This week against the Reds is a good opportunity for us to turn up with the right attitude and hopefully get the result that we want.
Rob Penny's been pretty vocal about putting faith in those young kids, regardless of results, I guess. Do you feel like there's a tipping point maybe there where they need to be protected a little bit more, or are you seeing the benefits of these guys getting to play, big minutes every week?
Yeah, it's a funny one. I to be honest, look, I've came into a pretty mature team in Brisbane under a head coach that probably had a really good balance of senior and younger players. Probably didn't play the younger players until they deserve to be played. But in saying that, like each situation in clubs around Australia in different sporting competitions, the makeup of teams can be a little bit different. So, from our perspective right now, we're pretty young, across the board. If you probably ask Rob, his choices that he's got to select from, there's probably not enough senior players that have put in their hands up, or if any senior players at all, to probably warrant leaving the younger kids out. So, in saying that though, look, hopefully, I say hopefully because, rebuilding processes, they don't always come to fruition, but hopefully, without a doubt, my understanding of these young kids that are coming through that are getting the opportunities, they're going to take within their stride and definitely going to be great players in the future.
Well, just on those youngsters again, Dan McKellar made some interesting points in his post-match media conference in Canberra on Saturday night. He was asked about the performance in particular of Nick Frost and Darcy Swain in the second row for the Brumbies. First time they'd started together, he was understandably pretty pleased, but he also went on to say that maybe we all need to cool our jets a little bit. Basically, don't blow too much hot air up their backsides and start talking about them as Wallabies. You've got a lot of young teammates, as we've been discussing. Do you reckon that we're all a little bit guilty, particularly in the media, of building these kids up to be the next big thing before they've really achieved too much?
I mean, yes and no, I suppose. If anything, probably happens more so in your industry, Nick, maybe in the media. I think, everyone loves a good story, especially in rugby at the moment. I think, we're all looking for a little bit of hope, when it comes to our situation, competition-wise, but also obviously with our ranking in the world for the national team. So maybe the young kids coming through, putting good performances on the paddock on the weekends, we're quick to jump on and hopefully, thinking that they're going to be our shining light for the future. But, I think Dan understands it, well, like most other coaches, and that's, one good game doesn't make a good career. And, if anything, it's making sure, what I know through my experience and coming through as a young kid is that making sure that these kids understand that they've got to earn everything they get. And as I said, one game just isn't going to cut it. But, if anything, it's promising that we've got plenty of young kids putting their hands up, and they're getting this recognition so early on, because that means they back those games up, and they back the seasons up. We'll have a really strong national team, hopefully, in a couple of years.
Yeah, as you mentioned, you kind of were one of these kids who had high expectations on him and probably have had pretty big expectations on you your entire career. How do you learn to manage that and handle that and not get ahead of yourself, particularly, when you're a teenager?
Oh, I keep going and mentioning Wayne Bennett's name quite a bit, but, it is my experience and I can't change it. And I'm really thankful that it was my experience because, if anything, he kept me away from the media as a 17-year-old, and whether or not, I don't know his intentions, but what I got from the experience was that I was protected. I was still a 17-year-old that was obviously still developing maturity. Yes, I was playing some really great football and getting a lot of attention, but I still hadn't made it yet. There was still a lot that I had to learn in the game. There was still a lot a lot of respect that I had to earn from my teammates. So I guess keeping me out of the limelight as such, even though I was in the limelight, I think added that protective bubble for me just to be able to grow and to be able to see how, I guess, the professional sporting industry works when it comes to media relations and public perception and pressure from inside. So very grateful for that experience that Wayne gave me. And, if I was a coach, I'd be doing exactly the same for the younger guys coming through.
So that was you, what was that, 04, wasn't it, 2004 as a 17-year-old? Yeah, so, and I imagine that you've been keeping an eye on Joseph Sawali and what he's been going through. I mean, there's a kid that, he's the most talked about kid in rugby, and we don't even know if he's going to play rugby or not. What would you be advising him at this stage, having played both codes, but more about his decision and his well-being?
Oh, look, I got asked by Tom Deason a couple of weekends ago to comment on exactly the same question you're asking, and my answer is still the same, and that's just to go and play the game that you want to play, that you got a genuine passion to play, and if that's league or if that's union, then choose it, irrespective of what's being promised to you monetarily or pathway wise. I think if you're in an environment where you're happy to be there, you've got a good coaching setup around you. And look, he's got that at the Rabbitohs with Wayne, and undoubtedly if he comes over to rugby, he's got Rob, who's overseeing quite a few teams in his day, and nurtured some great talent coming through, and obviously Dave Rennie at the top as well. I think the biggest thing is if you're not going to be happy, you're not going to fulfill your potential. So just make sure you're playing a game that you're going to be happy, and then you're going to enjoy to play.
It's interesting. I think Dave Rennie kind of came out earlier this year and said that he wants to keep relationships going with guys like Joseph. And so if he does go into rugby league, maybe rugby's an option down the track. Is that something you think that young players should keep in mind, that, a decision they make at 17 might not necessarily be what they're doing until they're 35?
Yeah, correct. And that's why I think you got to anchor back to, all right, what am I going to have the most fun doing? Because at the end of the day, if you're not having fun, you're not going to be fulfilling your potential, and your career longevity as such, it might not be as great. So, look, if Dave's still ringing, say if Joseph decides to stay at the South and Dave's ringing him next year, keeping tabs on him, great. But as long as Joseph's turning up and filling his obligations and enjoying the game he plays, who knows what can happen down the track. Look, yeah, he could be playing rugby in maybe 5 years' time or 10 years' time. He could be coming across after having 20 Origin games and 20 tests for the Kangaroos and come play for the Wallabies. Who knows? There's so many unknowns in life, let alone in professional sports, that I think all you got to worry about is the present moment and making sure that you're happy and doing what you love.
Do you reckon any of us can really understand the pressure that he's under at the moment? I mean, it must be huge and everyone's talking about you, everyone's speculating on your salary, all that sort of stuff. For a 16, no, he's just turned 17, hasn't he? Just turned 17-year-old.
Look, I was in a similar situation, but I still don't understand, because social media wasn't as big as it was back in my heyday. I certainly wasn't getting thrown $1 million out for my ability back then, and that's just a figure in papers. But you're right. Look, truth or no truth, people are talking about it, and he's going to school. He'd had friends and things like that popping up saying, "What are you doing?" So there's so much external pressure heaped on his shoulders at such a young age. I mean, I just hope that he, in his own mind and his parents around him, continue to stay as a 16-year-old and just worry about, hey, I just want to play footy. Everything else just doesn't matter.
And speaking of footy, you're obviously probably at the other end of the scale now, looking to 2021, still a lot of uncertainty, but moves are starting to be made for what might happen. Do you have any idea what your plans are or what you want to do? I think you've said a few times that you're keen to stay at the Tars. Is that still where your head's at?
Yeah, correct. Really love the place, love the guys, love what Rob's trying to instill from a game plan perspective. So, if the opportunity comes next year to be a part of the setup and continue to help these young guys coming through, then, obviously that's still what I would love to do. But, there's plenty of uncertainty, being my age and at my stage in my career. I'm obviously not first cab off the rank when it comes to taking care of, the roster for next year. There's plenty of other moving parts when it comes to players coming off contract and things like that. And I understand that. But, we've started, some light discussions with my manager, but we'll see where it takes us. All that I'm focused on is this weekend against the Reds, and really looking forward to playing my old teammates and my old teammate in the coach's box as well.
Exactly right. Hey, just one more quick one on your future. I know you're probably keen to move off that, but you got the age and the stage of your career. That's one sort of unknown. But then also, what does next year look like? Do the players hate not knowing, not having that certainty, at least what the competition's going to look like? Would they rather all that get sorted sooner or later?
Yeah, look, to be honest, I think it would be nice to have some understanding or some information around what it's going to look like for us next year. Players, in saying that, like, it depends on, what TVs are going to give us as well. And obviously, whether or not it's a local competition, does that hold less value than if it's a trans-Tasman competition between New Zealand? And if so, then are the contracting values going to diminish? So I think there's so many factors when it comes to next year, and boys are, hoping for some clarity sooner rather than later, because, you got players in situations that, may have deals overseas that, they would like to take up, or you got family situations where, say for example, myself, we've got a home up in Brisbane. Do we move my family back up to Brisbane, or do we stay down here? Like, there's so many different complex situations for each individual. So, the sooner we get some clarity, the better it is. And hopefully the playing group can get that soon. All right,
let's talk some footy. Friday night, Rebels and Brumbies at Leichhardt Oval. You would have been watching a lot of these teams. Well, you played against all these teams, haven't you? What are you thinking there? The Brumbies are looking pretty good, aren't they? Finding a way to win.
Yeah, look, I think the Brumbies probably epitomise a winning team for me, and that's they're winning games when they're probably not playing their best footy. So, there's going to be a point in time where they're going to be hitting on all cylinders, and it's going to be tough for the opposition to get up over them. And whether or not that's this weekend against the Rebels, I'm not too sure. But the Rebels obviously got some really good leaders in their team, obviously headed up by Matty. And, they had a good win last week and super time against the Force. So, but again, I keep saying buts, but, there's also factors of, being away from home, and there's so many different variables. I think makes for a good contest this week. And I think it'll be a close one with, Brumbies getting up again.
And obviously you guys playing the Reds this weekend. You mentioned Brad Thorne there. Do you think we're starting to see his team really emerge as kind of an image of him in some ways, with their toughness and their, a little bit of edge to them? Yeah,
look, definitely. I think, if one thing's certain, and obviously knowing Thorny and being around him as a coach and as a player, and that's he demands the physical side of the game be taken care of first and foremost. But I think, what you're probably seeing, especially this year and even pre-COVID, is that, they've got some really good attacking ability coming through as well. And, obviously with the addition of the assistant coach, last year, I think it was, or this year, he's added a string to their bow. So, the pieces of their puzzle, I guess, are coming together, and, they're starting to play some good footy. So, definitely a challenge for us, this weekend, but one that we're looking forward to, especially after round one, them knocking us off up in Queensland. It'd be nice to run out alongside and get a win against them this weekend.
And just quickly, Kay, the other thing that's been noticeable is that the players seem to have elevated the importance of this game. I think for years, we in the media have kind of talked it up. Oh yes, it's Queensland, New South Wales, and given it that mystique. But the players have taken that on board, and they're the ones talking it up now publicly. It's really good to see.
Yeah, it is great to see, and especially I think I haven't been across sort of what's been said this week, but definitely round one there was quite a bit of feeling pre-match from players, as you were saying, Nick, and it definitely showed in the game, especially with the physical nature early on. Obviously with Lockie Swinton laying a few hits on, and then him and Wilson going back and forth. So, that kind of edgy kind of attitude in and pre-game is really good for makes for a good contest, I think. So, looking forward to another fiery clash this weekend. Whether or not one of the boys comes out and has a little shot of them in the media, who knows? We'll have to wait and see.
And Geordie Pataya, just lastly as well, obviously was pretty impressive last weekend. How much of a threat is he, in his second game back?
Oh, I think he's a threat any time he's on the field. First and foremost, good to see him just get through uninjured last week, and hopefully Geordie can stay fit, because obviously really promising talent with huge upside and ability to his game, even though he's at a really good level now. So, he's one that we'll definitely be keeping an eye on because when he gets the ball, obviously he's a danger. So hopefully he has a good game, not a great game, and we get the win, and he's uninjured and can play next week.
Oh, that's the perfect scenario. Okay, thanks very much for joining us on Rugby Nation. It did feel last week, the couple of games, that maybe Super Rugby AU took a bit of a step up, and may it continue this weekend. Good luck with the Tars against the Reds, and thanks for joining us on Rugby Nation.
My pleasure. Cheers, Nick. Cheers, Beth. Thank you.
Good stuff. Thanks, mate. Thank you, Beth, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you very much.